Good evening and welcome to the Vigilate Dialogues Buzz. I am your host, Shaina Smith, and I am here tonight again with some special friends. We started a conversation last week talking about good governance, decolonization, national sustainable development strategy, the Commission of Inquiry, all things that concern us as a territory right now. We've had a lot of things happening, and what we want to do is make sure that we all have a solid understanding of what it is that is taking place. If you're tuned in tonight on Tola Radio FM 105 100.5, sorry, you can also view us on the Vigilante Dialogues Facebook page and our YouTube page, as well as on the BVI Buzz Facebook page and Umoja Facebook page. So Edrenka, make sure you share it. Where you can share your comments. We're going to also have a call-in section later on in the program. So, if you have any questions or comments, as we go along, you can make note of them and we will have that conversation. So, gentlemen, welcome to the National Boardroom.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you for having us, Sister Shaina.
Always. So you both are no strangers to the National Boardroom. And for those that may be new to the program, the focus or the intention is to always talk about those things that are affecting our quality of life and, more importantly, the solutions for them. And tonight we're going to continue our discussion where we were talking about the implications of the Commission of Inquiry and some of the recommendations that came down and what they mean to us. And I think we left off where we were starting to get into, what the A recommendations were, as well as what the B recommendations were. And we're going to pick that up as we go along over the next few weeks. And tonight, Gary is going to lead the conversation in terms of getting into what's in our Constitution and speaking specifically about the terms of reference that were approved for the Constitutional Review Commission and the public consultation that has been taking place over the last 3 months or so in terms of what, specifically do we want to see improved, taken out, put in, whatever the case may be. So Gary, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gary Reimer, BVI lender, currently live in Atlanta, part of the BVI diaspora, host of BVI Buzz podcast as well. You can find it on bvibuzz.com or any podcast app as well. As Shaina talked about last week, we started the conversations about, I think we did an overview of the COI, talking about how it affects us politically, socially, in those ways, and also the primary recommendations of the COI. One of the things that came out of that conversation was us talking about the constitutional reform, that one of the things that we kind of tie in together regarding this whole reform that we're trying to do. Right now, everyone should be aware that we are currently doing a public consultation of the BVI Constitution. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shaina, the last day of that is the 30th of January is the last day for submittals, comments?
I think it's the 31st, but I will double check the website.
Okay.
So it should be the last day of this month.
Okay, the last day of the month for everyone to be able to submit those comments to the board, who are the Constitutional Review Committee board, going through those review public consultations for the last 3 to 4 months. So one of the things that came out of that was basically the terms of reference that was approved by the House of Assembly for that constitutional reform. There was a number of items basically numbering from A to F. And I think within it's A to F, but then there are subparts of some of those points that are in that terms of reference in there. So basically, one of the terms of reference basically talks about reevaluating the vision of the people of the Virgin Islands and expressed in the preamble of the Virgin Islands, the constitutional order. So again, number A is basically reevaluating the vision of the people of the Virgin Islands as expressed in the Constitution, basically wondering, do we need to amend what's currently there, or do we need to continue that basically on the constitutional amendment of that part?
So do we
So
want to take them one at a time, or how are we going to do them?
yeah, we could do it one. You mean basically the terms?
Yeah,
Yeah, we could do it one at a time.
because we started the show before the show, so I don't want Edwinka to lose his thoughts. Because I know he had an excellent point to make. So just before we get into that, though, I have a point of information I wanted to share, where I was speaking before the show and sharing with you guys, where the first recommendation that was made in the COI report spoke about suspending temporary partial suspension of our Constitution. And I wanted to kind of help people understand what it meant, because I know sometimes people were referring to it and it wasn't clear. So what this is that an order in council was done, and again, our constitutional order, it is what we call it's a legal document, it's a law, but it is something that is done in the United Kingdom Parliament, and it's done by whoever the sovereign is. So before it was Her Majesty, now it'll be anything going forward, it'll be His Majesty. And we were able to find the document, I think, on the UK parliamentary page, as far as what this amendment would do. And the explanatory note says, this order suspends certain provisions of the Constitution of the Virgin Islands, in particular, those relating to ministerial government and the House of Assembly. It vacates certain offices, including that of the Premier, and dissolves the House of Assembly. It makes temporary provision for the government of the Virgin Islands by the governor, who shall consult, except in prescribed circumstances, an advisory council. So this is something that's supposed to be set up if this were to go into effect, and may establish a consultative forum. The order is to expire 2 years after commencement unless it is continued in force or is sooner revoked by a further order in council. An impact assessment has not been produced for this instrument, as no significant impact on the United Kingdom private, voluntary, or public sector is foreseen. I smiled when I saw that, because there is definitely significant impact on the Virgin Islands should this go into effect, but because we are not considered part of the United Kingdom proper, this was not done. So, that's a whole other show in itself.
Right.
I don't want us to run down the rabbit hole, but I want us to stick a pin in it, because one of the things that this highlighted for me, gentlemen, was the fact that, a lot of these things in my mind should have been taught to us at least in high school, in terms of understanding our relationship with the United Kingdom as an administrative power and us as a colony, and how our laws are made, can be changed without any consultation or consent, actually. And that some of the how what we have, or what we understand or experience as governance, is not what is considered the full measure of self-governance. And persons would have heard myself and Edwinka discussing these things all the time, in terms of, what is the full measure of self-governance and the United Nations decolonization conversation. So again, we want to tie everything together, show everybody how all these things are stitched together, and how it is we have to have a working knowledge of some of these things. So that essentially, this amendment to our 2007 Constitution is already done, but it is not enacted, meaning it's not law until the governor gazettes it. So while, there was the press release that said that 48 of the 49 recommendations would be done, in my mind, this 49th one was done, but it is being held now as a way to force us or incentivize us, so to speak, to make sure that we do the other 48 recommendations. And again, I've said in other forums, this isn't a way for good governance to work. So that's, we just put that out there for persons to help them understand, and we'll talk more about it in the future in terms of, how we're being governed or ruled by another country and how it's affecting us and our way forward.
So another part of that too, what you just talked about too, is the order in council that accommodates or goes along with these recommendations that we're supposed to be enacting as well too. That was something that was added after the fact. So after we had the COI, we had another, as we call now, order in council that happened in the UK. Can you expand a little bit about what exactly that actually entails? What is an order in council for people who don't really understand that process?
For that part, okay. So order in council, I went to Wikipedia, and they said it's a type of legislation in many countries, especially the Commonwealth realms. So in the UK, it's legislation that's formally made in the name of the monarch by and with the advice of the Privy Council. And the Privy Council, they consist of the monarch, the prime minister, and senior politicians or advisors, right? Who may have been current members or former members of the UK Parliament. So it could be the House of Lords or the House of Commons. So essentially, there's this group that comes together, advises the monarch on a particular matter. So in our case, it would be, there was a commission of inquiry. This is what the commissioner made a recommendation in that, in order for us to fix the issues or the matters that were investigated or discovered through this inquiry, that this particular action needed to be made. So in order to do that, in terms of any legislative changes, because even with the new constitution that we are in the process now of developing, that would have to also be done by an order in council. So there's another piece of legislation that basically gives the monarch, which is our head of state, and the governor is their representative here, right? That says that it's called the West Indies Act, that gives them, I would say, permission. I don't know if that'd be the correct terminology. We'll have to bring a lawyer on to help explain some more of these things in depth. But it's to say that this is what gives them the authority to do what it is that they do in terms of making legislation for us, right? That governs us. So the sovereign or the head of state can create legislations at any time.
And the governor at his reservation, anytime he can request that this order in council be brought forward, correct? He has to be the one to basically say that he wants to bring ask for this order to be brought into council. He has to be the one that says that he wants it to
go into effect.
To go into effect, correct.
That's what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, so the process in terms of any legislation, because we've seen it in the past where the House of Assembly passes legislation, but it has to go to the governor for assent. And then after the assent, it's gazetted or published in what we call the Virginal Gazette, which is like the government's newspaper, technically. Edgewenka's generation know about the Gazette. Some of us were, it was something new for me, especially, and I only knew about it working in the public service, that this was part of making documents official. So to make this official, it would have to be gazetted, which means the governor would sign off and ask it to be published. And at that point is when it would go into effect. Or if there's a future date, they would say, and then it goes into effect. So the Privy Council essentially has already approved this amendment, and it's there basically pinned to the wall. And, there's a lot of debate about, whether the governor can just make the decision arbitrarily or not. But to me, it's like, again, the decision was already made, because when the Commission of Inquiry report was released to the governor a month ahead of when the public actually received it and when our government actually saw it, a lot of discussion and decisions were already made. So when in the beginning of May, the UK Overseas Territory Minister came to the island, I'm sure it was like 99.9% sure this is what we're going to do. Follow the recommendations to the T. And, basically the governor would become the government for 2 years. So, Ejenko, what's your thoughts on that whole thing? That's a prissy. Because I know you had a lot to say about that when this whole thing was spiraling.
All right. I we continue, I think, to leave out the context of the United Nations Charter, Article 73. Now, I don't think we put everything that's happening in that context. So when the UK, and it seems as though the UK continues to ignore Article 73 and wants the United Nations to accept that the Virgin Islands is quite satisfied with the way things are and no longer have ambitions for any um, full measure of self-governance. However, the United Nations has refused to accept the United Kingdom's assertion that we are fine with our colonial status, which they attempt to say to the United Nations that we no longer have a colonial status. We are no longer a colony. We have a partnership with the United Kingdom. So when we see the Commission of Inquiry, we see the recommendations, and we see the order in council, which uh, contradicts the Article 73 in the sense that it's taking us backward into non-democracy. When the administrative powers responsibility is to advance us towards democracy, full democracy, and a full measure of self-governance. So if you read, for example, uh, the subsection A, let me see, B of Article 73 of the United Nations, it says to develop self-government, to take due account of the political aspirations of the peoples and to assist them in the progressive development of their free political institutions according to the particular circumstances of each territory and its peoples and their varying stages of advancement. So you hear how that sounds? They are supposed to be advancing us because the United Nations process of decolonization uh, advised the administering powers that they're supposed to advance us towards a full measure of self-governance. And I think there are three uh, conditions of that self-governance. One is independence. One is uh,
Free
self
association.
self 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 sustain self
Free
governance,
association and integration.
free association and association, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the commission and inquiry and you look at the recommendations and the order in council, which that's supposed to be our constitution, which in fact isn't our constitution. It's a constitution imposed upon us by the United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
So when you put everything in that context, it's like instead of advancing towards a measure of self-governance, we are going back into colonization. And so
Yeah.
that's my perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, I could be wrong, but that's how I see it. And so we continue to advance the agenda of the United Kingdom without considering what we want
Mm-hmm.
and what we are entitled to under United Nations Charter that the United Kingdom is supposed to be adhering to.
Mm-hmm.
You see, So the order in council is a direct attack on democracy. Because I mean, the amendment, I should say, the amendment to the order in council that allows the governor solely at any point he wants to suspend the constitution and basically take control of the country is anti-democratic
Mm-hmm.
because it's not an elected process. There's no referendum that gives that permission, and so you have an appointed governor of the United Kingdom, non-elected official, with basically carte blanche powers. He could just take over the country anytime he wants. He doesn't have to assent to any of our laws. Um, so he has these reserved powers that allows him to do as he please with the lives of the people of the Virgin Islands. And so, if we are going to have a constitutional review that is meaningful, then part of our discussion should be around the powers of the governor. Now, when you look at the COA, for example, and the COA recommendations, much of the COA statements in the COA is ambiguous statements. I like to call them ambiguous statements because they go, they talk about potential for corruption, uh, uh, potential for mismanagement, but there is no evidence in the COA that supports uh, mismanagement, corruption, and illegality. The only evidence that points to illegality is in the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force, which is under the direct control of the governors of the territory. And I'm not talking about any individual governor. I'm talking about this is you, and we all know this. The police come under the governor. The civil service fall under the governor. So uh, any recommendation or any assertion or any conclusion that the COA report has come to me, should have implicated governors of a territory in their mismanagement of the civil service. Because if you're saying the civil service, when you say the civil service is corrupt, and members of the civil service is corrupt, right? Or are you saying the politicians are corrupt? That would mean that all of the administrators in the civil service would have to be complicit in the corruption because there is a structure and a system of governance that every politician must follow because the politicians themselves don't do these things. I mean, correct me when I'm going wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The politicians don't do these things. And if the governor is in charge, then the governor ought to be the one identifying when the politicians are going astray or leading the civil service astray. That's my perspective on the whole thing. And I know you want to say something, Gary. So
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the governor because actually that was one of the discussion that I had made a point of, because you made a good point about with the Constitution, because one of the points that I made regarding the Constitution. So in Chapter 3 of the Constitution, I think point number 2, it says that the governor shall have such powers and duties as conferred or imposed on him or her by this Constitution or any other law, and such powers as His Majesty, at the time His Majesty, may from time to time be pleased to assign to him or her. So within our Constitution, we actually have given the governor power within the Constitution. So when we
But
talk about,
it ain't our constitution. They was one who gave us the constitution and
Well,
give and appoint the governor and give the governor the power that they wanted him to have. We
so
ain't had
when
nothing to
we
do with it.
but when we talk about restricting the power of the governor, then so who will have a right to restrict the power of the governor within the constitution then? Because if we're giving the governor power in the constitution,
mhm.
and we're talking about wanting to empower the people themselves, the local people have the power more locally and take away the power. How can we then restrict the governor's powers if within the constitution it says even if we restrict it, the governor can still get powers given to him by his majesty at any time? Seems,
So
go ahead.
so how this thing has developed over the years, Gary, is I don't know what happened in earlier constitutions, but since we were able to reinstate, because the constitution was abolished in 1901, right? And we were governed strictly from the Leeward Islands Federation. When the march happened and we made our application to get back our legislative council, it meant now that we have to have back a constitution. So the constitution now was put back into effect, or a constitution, I should say, was put back into effect in July 1950. That's where the 4th of July comes from as a holiday, because it originally was called Colony Day, and then it was changed to Territory Day, and now we refer to it as Virgin Islands Day. So that's the history of that. So when that came into being, that is what put that governance framework, so to speak, now in place. And a commission similar to what we did, except we had one commissioner, and that was HR Penn. So it was a local policy in Cromwell. So we have had a say in the development or any amendments or reviews of the Constitution, because the idea is that you have a body that is put together that is given the task of going and consulting with the people, in addition to obviously the public officials, on what we were improving. So whether it was the transition of power. So over the years we saw where the ministerial government wasn't the initial play. There was something called members, and they had limited responsibility. And over the years, it has progressed. What hasn't happened on a continuum, I would say, is that we, as you're saying, based on the international protocols, right, that call for decolonization of people, meaning you have a right to govern yourself, that your administrative power is supposed to be empowering you, essentially, through a constitutional review. So let's say, for example, at one point we were not responsible for the Ministry of Finance. And then there came a time when the ministry became a portfolio under an elected official. So there has been involvement or opportunity, I would say, for us to be engaged. A lot of time it's just left to public officials or the politicians. That now of late, in the last review, I remember in 2000, that would have been 6, thereabouts, that we had opportunity to advance. But before that, it was like 1976, I think, was the constitution that the 2007 replaced. So that was quite a stretch of time. And again, as Cromwell is saying, the decolonization efforts should have progressed much more to the place of full measure of self-governance, where you basically phase out the powers of the governor, and those are transitioned over to the elected government on the ground, to the point of, again, whether you want to be integrated, which is a whole other show to go through those things, free association or full independence, and then it could be independence as part of the Commonwealth, where the monarch remains head of state, or it's something where you have a local head of state that is elected or appointed, because there are different options even within each of those. So that's sort of the whole the gamut of it, so to speak, in terms of constitutional reviews and what has happened over time. And I think there's some really good information about that, just to let our listeners know, and then I'll let you jump in there, Cromwell. On the website for the Constitutional Review Commission, your constitution .vg. I was given an email address by mistake. Your Constitution VG, it gives the history of the constitutional reviews over the years, again since 1950, and what's in the current one that we have now. Yes, elder man.
Now, and I think you outlined correctly the constitutional process. And when you look at the process, you would notice that the UK decides what is going to allow us to have in the Constitution. Yes, our elected representatives go to the table to discuss the various reviews in the Constitution and ask for advancement. But then the UK says, well, we're not allowing this and we're not allowing that, and so they decide how far we are going to advance and when. So that in itself to me is the maintenance of a colonial political status, where you have some master somewhere saying, children, you can have this, but you can't have that. We're not advancing you any further than this, and So I think that whole process in itself needs to be examined. Now we are having this constitutional review based on a terms of reference that our legislature passed. I don't know, Shaina, so maybe you need to help me with this. Who came up with those terms of reference? Did we come up with those terms of reference? And what was the consultation in the Virgin Islands to develop a terms of reference for constitutional review?
So the history of it, actually, I'm glad you raised that. In 2020, the then Premier, Honorable Andrew Foy, actually announced a constitutional review. And the terms of reference was a terms of reference that was put forward and approved. And it was now as part of the Commission of Inquiry report that the recommendation for constitutional review came up again, which, in reality, it was already in process. And they added to it, as well as the expansion. The commissioner made a recommendation of terms of reference that were in addition to what was there before, and the expansion of the membership of the committee, or the commission rather. So it was something that was being advanced from before by us, because we can initiate a constitutional review.
Okay.
And then no, it essentially is like saying it got merged into the Commission of Inquiry recommendations, because it showed up there as well to say, well, yes, we need to look at the governance framework and see whether some of the issues that were raised in the Commission of Inquiry that need to be addressed in the Constitution, as well as other legislation and different things that came up. So that's where it started.
And what was our part in the development of the terms of reference?
Well, in terms of the public, or just
the public. What was Virgin Islanders' part? What role did Virgin Islands play in the development of the terms of reference?
I don't recall that if there was any public consultation. I think this was all came from the government.
Okay, so then I guess it can be said that the Virgin Islanders' participation was done through their elected representatives. That's what we can conclude.
That's what it would be. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that would mean then, I guess then, that only the persons who voted for the government was represented in the development of the terms of reference, because persons who didn't vote for the government, definitely not for the present government, because the present government is not elected, but the government that was there before, those who didn't vote for that government didn't have a say. So should every one of us have had a say in the development of the terms of reference? Where do we want to go? Where what we want to have considered? Uh, I mean, should all of us have had a say in that, or we ought to be satisfied with the process that has taken place so far?
But, but,
So Gary, go ahead. Go ahead.
well, my understanding of the terms, they're just terms, right? They're basically frameworks that the Constitutional Review Committee should use to help with the review process. So my understanding is that there's nothing pinpoint within those terms of reference that said this is the way we're going. There are points which are right. They're using those points to say, okay, based on what we think should be how we should move forward, we should use these as frameworks or points to move forward. Like, for example, the first one says to reevaluate the vision of the people of the Virgin Islands as expressed in the preamble of the Virgin Islands Constitution Order 2007 number 1678, and to amend accordingly if necessary. See Constitution Section 1. So they're basically saying, giving us points to look at as reference. So basically, number one, that point is we can either keep what we have as the vision of the people of Virgin Islands based on the current, or we can change it. But going back to the point is we have to reevaluate it based on the vision of the people, as a point.
Yeah. So it's like for most of these things.
So we.
Go ahead. You're breaking up.
You're breaking up. You go. Yeah, go.
Okay.
You started to say something.
Yeah. Oh no, I was just going to say that usually for commissions, just as similar to the COI, there were some broad terms of references in terms of what the commission or the commissioner was to investigate, right? And there wasn't necessarily, let's say, for example, compared to our audit becomes very specific in terms of what we're looking at. The involvement now, I think, in terms of the public as part of the review process is sufficient to say you're getting the input, such that if there are questions or comments that persons say, this wasn't included in the terms of reference specifically, but this is specifically a concern that I have and should be reflected in the report that the commission now has to put together and submit to the governor and the premier by June of this year.
And who decides what recommendations are accepted and goes into the new constitution?
Well, I guess that's the next stage of all of this, where the report is done, and then there has to be discussion about what the new constitution will be drafted to look like, and then that's submitted to the UK.
Right.
In terms of starting the negotiation of these are the changes that we would like to see. Because like we said, from in the beginning, this is something that has to essentially be sanctioned by them. This is not us saying, well, we want this, so therefore you need to approve this. And, we go along our merry way. It is a negotiation process, because there have been times when recommendations may have been made for particular things, but, they were not approved, as it were. And therefore were not included in the final statutory instrument that was approved. And
that decision was made by the United Kingdom.
Yeah. So it'll be the same thing. It goes back through the Privy Council in terms of making the recommendation to the head of state, which is in our case now it is His Majesty, to say, this is what the new constitution should look like for the Virgin Islands based on, the process that we have gone through. So, Cromwell, you were saying something at the beginning. Let's pick up on.
I'm asking this question because I'm wondering if we have enough time really for us to have a discussion among ourselves about what we want as a way forward for our country.
Good question. And I would say,
is this being rushed? Is this being forced down our throats? Is it based on some other group or government's agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel as a Virgin Islander that we're having some measure that I have some measure of control, or we as Virgin Islanders have some
Mm-hmm.
measure of control of this process. That this thing has come up. A commission inquiry was formed. Recommendations was made. One of the recommendations, the constitutional review, and we got this time amount of time to make recommendations and have this constitutional review.
Mm-hmm.
And we,
Full speed down the
and
road.
Right.
full speed down the road. And I think that a constitution that was going to govern 35, 40,000 persons for perhaps at least a 10-year period,
Mm-hmm.
right? Need to have some serious deliberations
Yeah.
among the people who's to be governed,
No,
and then
I agree.
when you put that in the context of the United Nations Charter
Mm-hmm.
on decolonization, particularly Article 73 that applies to non-self-governing territories, I think there's a breach there. I think there's a breach there, and if I was the premier, I would have made representations to the United Nations about the behavior of this so-called partnership between the overseas territories, not just the Virgin Islands, but the overseas territories and the United and the administering powers, not just the UK, but the
Yeah.
administering powers, and to show that their actions, their behavior is not a partnership, and it seems to me
Mm-hmm.
like it's more like a dictatorship. You know,
And
you you know, you are colony, we are the boss. You do what we say, and then turn around and go to the United Nations and say we like it this way. That's what they're telling the people in the United Nations. The
Mm-hmm.
people in the Virgin Islands like this, or our colonies. Britain is saying to the United Nations, you need to accept that our colonies are no longer colonies because them like to be colonies. Go ahead. You're going to say something, Gary. Sorry.
And one quick interjection for those that are listening to us on Tola Radio 100.5. You are tuned into the Vigilante Dialogues Buzz. This is a special series that I'm doing. I'm your host, Shaina Smith Archer, along with my friends Gary Reimer and Edgewenka from the BVI Buzz and Umoja shows, talking about what's been happening in our territory over the last 12 months and helping us to get a better understanding because as Edwenka, you rightly said, we needed more time because this is something where on the calendar, Gary, if you remember, the implementation framework, it spoke about this being essentially a year, but we lost Gary. Okay, he'll be back. But the actual work of the committee didn't start until October, Cromwell. So it's like we lost quite a few months just putting things in place in terms of approving additional members, going to the House of Assembly and getting those things in play. And now, the public consultation period is ending this month. So there was about 3 months, give or take, for consultation through public meetings and some of it through the media, different appearances by the commission. But the questions are like you're saying, the weight of the questions in the review in terms of what would be our decolonization status, looking at the vision of the country and what would that look like, because to me those are conversations that have to be had to inform our constitution review, and not just everything is being bundled up into one thing and not enough time is given to discussing the individual aspects of what this this whole thing entails, because like you're saying, this is our future direction we're talking about.
I mean, take into consideration the atmosphere. Take into consideration the atmosphere of the discussions. Uh, I feel under duress. I don't know about you.
Mm-hmm.
I frightened. I scared. I feel like something gonna happen to me. When it's all said and done, you know, my I'm not gonna really have a say, and and the UK is just going to go ahead and set up things they want it set up, and then of course those of us who uh, who are in favor of the UK's decisions will be happy, and those of us who are not will be unhappy. But then, how do we tell whether the majority is happy with the UK's decisions, or whether the majority is unhappy? How do we figure democracy into that process? Because
Yeah.
democracy is the rule of the majority. What, as I know it, I might be wrong again. I didn't claim to know everything. But this is my personal perspective. This is how I'm seeing things advance. And and I don't think that we should feel under this amount of pressure. And of course, we have if we don't. This is the interesting thing to me, Shaina.
Uh-huh.
If we don't comply with the UK's direction, this uh, the direction, uh, dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't comply with what they want, let me just talk simply. If we don't comply with what they want in the time that they want it, they'll just take away our democracy altogether, all our decision making processes.
Mm-hmm.
They'll just uh, suspend the little constitution that they give us already. They'll just take that away from us and take away our legislature, and take away our voting rights, take away our representation, uh, and just install a UK appointed figure with perhaps UK appointed administrators in the civil service. I mean, anything is possible with that scenario. It could
Yeah.
be a scenario where the governor take over. He bring a bunch of administrators from England, and they take up the various departments or ministries, and they decide how things gonna go, how things gonna run, and we have no say in the matter. So
Yeah.
it's
And
a scary,
I
it's a scary, it's a scary thing.
I think, persons might think that might be a bit extreme, but it is possibly a worst case scenario that you could have as it relates to, what could happen under direct rule. Because I know for some persons, they still feel that the governor needs to take over in order to fix, which, yeah, that doesn't work for me in terms of how do we improve how we govern ourselves and taking responsibility for what it is we're coming on. So guys, we're coming on the tyranny at the clock. I just want to open up the phone lines. If persons want to call in, they can reach us at 284-541-1192. 284-541-1192. You can also call that number via WhatsApp to make your contribution, whether you have a question or a comment. Gary, I don't know where we are on the agenda.
Yeah, because I got my internet
But
up.
I think this was a good pretext though, in terms of the other side of this, because a lot of the conversations I've been hearing have been, okay, these are the terms of reference. What do we want? So
Right.
persons have said, we want to see a representative for the outer islands, so that should be a separate district. And for me, that conversation again, like Adrian and I were talking when you popped out for a minute, is one where you have to have a district boundaries commission. It's like you don't just arbitrarily create a district. There's a process for that as well. And I did some research, and the last one that was done was 2009. However, I wasn't able to identify whether a conclusion was made in terms of were we supposed to change the district boundaries, or what was the outcomes of it, because every commission is supposed to have a report. Whether or not you take the recommendations, again, is up to our elected officials to bring those things forward. But the commission was constituted in 2009 and was supposed to be done. I don't know if it was at that time to discuss the same question, but there's so many things that has been bundled up inside of this constitutional review commission that, similar to Edrenka, I am, very hesitant and nervous in terms of, what the report will say. It may actually say you need to go and have a district boundary commission. It might come out in there to say that we can make a final decision or recommendation on this because further work is needed, and that needs to be done as a separate item. But these would be the other things that can carry forward within this constitutional review, and again make recommendations to the government in terms of what are those things that need to be addressed now, or can be addressed now, and we go forward with those discussions. Because truth be told, the process of this is, this could take another 6 months after the report is submitted. It could take another 6 months before we actually see what the final document in terms of our constitution will look like, and then it have to be adopted. Usually they're done close to an election cycle, so when the elections come, then it goes into effect. But obviously in this case now the timing is off,
Right.
so it'll have to come after. And again, it can be done because it allows the current legal framework allows for something like that. But yeah, we really have a lot of pieces to this puzzle on the table, and the public education for me is very crucial in terms of people's tuning in and engaging in this thing and actually staying with it through the whole process, seeing the cycle through to the end. We shouldn't, I think, before they go to the UK, we should see what it is we're going to the UK to negotiate. Right. I don't want us to be left out of the loop all of a sudden after this, where, one, we need to see the commission's report. Two, when that's been discussed now amongst the elected officials and whomever else on the ground, then, what's going forward, we should know what that is, so that when it comes back in terms of this is what we were able to get or not able to get included in the next revision, that we know we're fully aware of what it is going on. Because there's a bigger game afoot, as Cromwell said. This thing, even if decolonization for us in terms of achieving a full measure of self-governance, whatever we decide now has to lay, even if it's one foundation block, it is something that we have to do now. So we have a call coming in. Let me let the call in. Caller, welcome to Vigilate Dialogues, Buzz.
Vigilate Dialogue. This is me. I've been listening for the past 15 minutes.
Hold on a second. Can you guys hear him?
Yes.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
I could barely hear him, but I'm trying my best.
Like copper coat and so forth. So I just wanted to weigh in on it. We have big challenges. Cromwell, Edrenka said that he's scared, and I'm scared too. In terms of how this thing is panning out, so we have to be mindful, and vigilance is the word, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to be ever mindful. But I'll just like to state that we have this order in council overhead. We have the particular implementation of recommendations, and we have a number of unknowns. When you're trying to solve a particular puzzle, when you try to solve a math problem, some things have to be constant and only one moving. But now they have a lot of moving parts in this. So it is concerning, and I join with the concerns that we have, yes.
So, Honorable, as far as you're seeing, some of the points you raised tonight in terms of, should we have had more time in terms of going through this process?
Well, it was intended to be 2 years. Number one, it got cut down to 1. It was intended to start in July. The public consultation period didn't start until November 1st, although they announced November 1st. It started in the middle of the holiday season, So we lost about 2 to 3 weeks. And there was a resolution passed today in the House, I think, that it was announced by the Premier or passed that the Commission has asked for the complete 6 month extension, another 6 months to what the deadline was to be. But it seems as if they want that to get the report put together as opposed to extending the consultation period. So we have to see and advocate for more time, because I am pleased to state that finally we have additional inquiries being made and interest being shown from our young adults in terms of wanting to hear more, learn more, and be more involved. I think that's a good thing. But the date of which they were calling it off in terms of closing the public consultation is not proper as far as I am concerned. And yes, we'll need more time to get more input, more involvement in this.
Okay.
And see, that was one of my, before I popped off, that was one of my points, because I think, as we mentioned, Shaina, before, we have a lot of information overload that's happening right now in the BVI. So when you have the COI, you have all these different things going on. At the same time, you want people to process the COI. You want them to give input into a constitutional reform, which is a very important thing for them too. As Juenka talked about before, this is something that's possibly going to be in place for at least a decade, 10 years. So why the rush to have it kind of pushed down our throat, to kind of rush to have this in place in a short period of time without having the people voicing their opinion? I know, yes, they're doing public consultations around at different times, but I still think we still, as a people, still need time to be able to voice our thoughts more in depthly about the Constitution. There are a lot of people who don't even know what is currently in the Constitution. So you might need to have a session where you actually educate people on what actually is in the Constitution, so they can make a recommendation on what they would like to change in the Constitution. So those are things that I think right now, I think the timeline is very, very short order for us, just because there's a lot of information that people are trying to process right now on top of this right now, that you may not get the full engagement of what you want from the people.
Well, Shaina, if I may, unless you have a caller.
3 things I'm going to state. Sorry, go ahead, Drinker.
Yeah, I don't know, if you guys are feeling what I'm feeling, but psychologically, I think the Virgin Islands is in a very precarious place. As far as our thoughts about our elected representatives, our leadership, and the way our country is going, I get a sense that we don't have confidence in ourselves, nor confidence in each other to govern ourselves. And I think that has the way the COI report has been written, and the rancor in which it was conducted, and the insinuations that were made in it, and the implications, and the way and the ambiguity of some of the statements, created in my mind, and a lot of persons I have spoken with, a feeling that the Virgin Islanders are basically a corrupt people who can't manage themselves, and need Jesus Christ to come and take over the country, and to put it to run it right for a period of time until we could be mature enough to run it ourselves. Am I way out there somewhere? Am I exaggerating? Am I extreme like Shaina
But
uses the word.
I'm not sure how you could feel that way, and that's what I've been saying for about 5 to 6 years. It's exactly what I'm saying. Let me tell you exactly what you heard me say and what I've said before. We lack confidence. All people lack confidence in leadership of our people by our people, and this is where we start off. So it's the same thing that you're actually repeating. I've said again that the COI was a done deal, waiting for 6 months to report back. I said again that at the end of the day, it's unfair and it is without merit that a order in council is written up on us. I've said again that we ain't fighting enough to actually get our people sensitized. And the last thing I'm saying is that we have to stop this concept that we're going to fight them to love us a little bit more so we can stay as we are. All people have been basically, the re-education of our people is critical to the mindset that we have. We don't trust each other, we trust more, and we have a number of issues that we have to come to grip with because yes, we have faulted, but does it lend to us taking the Constitution order that they give us away? And what is it that we're looking? What is it that we want? We want to be fighting for something as opposed to be constantly fighting against everything that people have thrown at us. They want what we want, but they're fighting for it, and we are just here putting. We have to know that for 60 years, we have been unable to get our people to the table to explain what these 3 levels of self-governance is all about. So we have to now hasten up that. And this whole concept of telling the folks what to do with their particular thing, we have to demand that we go the independent route. I don't mind going full republic, but the fact is that our people got to be brought along, right? So we have a lot of work to do for ourselves. But this whole concept that we're going to amend some of the present order so that we can be more comfortable, what commitment do they have to make us comfortable? None.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's
so you're not off
ahead,
at all.
Yeah.
You're right on, but you've been on based on the whole, the whole thing. I'm not hearing enough voices, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
I am not hearing enough voices stating that we're in the middle of a crisis, and
we're surprisingly very calm. Yeah.
I'm not hearing enough voices.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Honorable, it's something where I share the sentiment in that, what I don't, I guess, is what I'm trying to put my finger on. And we're gonna wrap up in our because we're over time. But is in terms of why is that the case? Is it that people they don't have enough information or working understanding of what it is that we really need to be upset about, essentially? And
the challenge you're going to have in every land is this, right? Once you're getting your check on the 15th and 30th, you're paying your house rent, you're paying your bills. Although you left back with less, you can't. There's nothing left to say by the time you finish paying the bill these days with the rising costs and everything. But once you get the 15th and 30th, some folks don't care less and so forth, right? But those who are analyzing it is seeing the rope being turned. And there's something I'm saying more and more, and it becomes more and more apparent. The shepherd have taught the sheep how to be mindful of the wolf, the particular pit bull coming into the pen. But the only one eating lamb chops is the shepherd. So we have to be mindful as to what it is that we ourselves are allowing, because our people has basically been told that you don't have a right anymore to your self-determination because we have some rogue politicians, some rogue civil servants, some rogue citizens. And if you allow those things to go, nobody is there to control them. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, it is all of the subjects under the special responsibilities that have not been functioning up to par. There's a justice system. There are basically all of these arms and institutions that we were supposed to put into effect in order to actually get the vision crystallized for people for self-determination. None of those have been put in place. So we have to, our victory right now is to make sure that we set a foundation and a timetable for the education process, for the referendum process, and for the move. Unless we get those in, just like 1959, when the people say, we are not ready for it, just like in 1976, when the commission came from the United Nations, and the people said, we're not ready for it, we need to learn more. We are saying today, 60 plus years later, we need to learn more. We're not ready for it. When will we be ready for it?
Yeah, that's right. All right, guys, we're going to have to stick a pin here, but definitely be back next week again to get more into this whole thing. So, Honorable, thank you for calling in with your contribution.
Thank you.
So, gentlemen, I think we have a very robust conversation tonight. For persons who may have just tuned in on the radio, we're streaming on simulcast on Tola Radio VI. You can go to our Vigilantes Dialogues Facebook and YouTube, as well as BVI Buzz and Emotion to be able to see this video, because it's something where, just like we've been talking about, we need to educate ourselves to learn more. Because even for me, I am learning every time I have to sit down and prepare for the show, guys. So it's something where I'm concerned that there are those now who don't have access to the resources that maybe I had. So what I just did is I've shared links again in the show notes, the comment section. What's the Privy Council? What is the order in council? What is an order in council? And I also found online, because again, guys, all of these things are available through the UK Parliament website. I shared the VI Constitution Interim Amendment Order 2022. So for persons who are curious and want to know what exactly is in that amendment that would have created what we loosely refer to as direct rule, you can go there and read through it. It's only a couple pages long because it isn't the whole Constitution, but it tells you what the changes are and the specifics around it, right? So what I read was the explanatory note, which is found on the last page. So persons can go there first and then probably go back. But again, it's very important that we start to put these things in our education system, and preferably from the secondary level, because if we want to have good citizens, that participate, that are included, all the characteristics of good governance that we spoke about last week, it is important that they have access to the information. So even here locally, we have to do a better job of putting our laws online, making them accessible, so that persons now can go ahead and continue to educate themselves on what it is that we're doing. So I'm gonna ask my co-host panel to give us their final words, and then we'll wrap up for tonight. So the elders go first, Gary.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Shaina. It was a pleasure for me to be on with you as usual. We always have a good time coming together. So thank you for having me on. I would like to see us not being so complicit with what the administering power is trying to heap on us, and that we need our leadership to take a more deliberate approach to our advancement, so that we could have meaningful discussions and come up with a true way forward for the next decade. That we cannot continue to think that the United Kingdom is going to act in our best interest, particularly when it conflicts with their best interest. And so we have to make a decision. We can't be children for the rest of our lives. We have to cut the navel string and go up and have confidence in ourselves. And one of the things, and this is my last point, one of the things that the Constitution should happen, should do for us, is to have measures in place, articles in place that would give us confidence in our own self-governance.
Mhm.
That's what I think we should be looking at right now.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, thanks for being here again. Thank you for this evening. Again, I was here for the most part, then I got popped out for a little bit. But going back to what Edwin talked about, I agree with 100% with what he said. I think, as I said before, there's a lot of information out there, but we shouldn't get complacent with what's out there and feel, oh, there's too much things out there to be bothered with, so I'm not even going to be bothered with this constitutional reform that's out there. Because one of the things that happen if you don't have a voice, somebody will give you a voice without you make your input. So you will have a voice, but it'd be a voice that was given to you as opposed to you having input in it. So be very mindful of that. Make your voices and thoughts heard on that point. Again, one of the biggest things that we talked about too is education and making sure that people are educated and being aware of our history. I think one of the things that we have is why people are quote unquote fearful of different things is they don't know where they came from. They're not aware of what the people who actually were not afraid to fight the UK. People were UK were giving us different things, and BVI Lender said, no, we don't want this.
Mhm.
And they had opened up discussions for to say, okay, let's have a dialogue and let's make a change. But we seem to have forget, or we were never told the stories. So that's why some of us are afraid or timid, because we feel that whatever the UK says we have to do, and that's the way it should be. But we have fought for rights. We have fought for our voices to be heard in the past. And again, going back to what Shaina said, these are things that need to be educated so people can be aware of where we came from. I think that's part of the problem. We are not aware. I'm not aware. Some of the things that came up over the years, I wasn't taught in school, in high school, primary school. These are things that I learned after the fact, 10, 20 years after the fact, which is not good. So let's try to make a change and try to educate our people so we can make better decisions for our future moving forward.
Definitely. Well, guys, we're gonna be back next week. I'm gonna see if we can add some additional voices because, again, similar to what our caller said, we need to hear more, and everybody needs to add their voices to this change in conversation for a better Virgin Islands. So I am your host. Until next time, we'll be back here on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, through the Vigilante Dialogues pages, as well as on FM Radio 100.5 Tola Radio. We want to thank them for this opportunity to get out to even more persons in terms of doing sharing what we know. Because that's one of the things, you guys know me over the years. I'm always reading and researching things because, I like to be aware of what's happening, especially when it comes to, what's happening to my country and, the future of it. So I'm not going to keep that information to myself, but to make sure that it's out there. So go ahead, visit the page, look in the comment section. You'll see all of the different information we refer to tonight. And I also want to encourage you to go to the college's Facebook page. Back in 2020, again, when the Constitution Review Commission was first announced, there were three different talks. One was called the Constitution Roundtable, and then there was a Frederick Pickering Memorial Lecture Series. Honorable Dr. Caroline Corbin and Mr. Benito Whitley, they were speakers on one panel talking about decolonization. And then Mr. Gerard Ferrara, QC, well, it's HC now. Casey, King's Counsel, he spoke about, again, the constitutional history. And those are important pieces that we had done to help, again, educate ourselves about what it is we're doing and then the importance of it. Because this will not be the last one. There are many more to come. So it's important that we continue to be prepared for, what we're going forward in the future. So until next time, I'm your host, Shaina Smith-Archer, telling us, encouraging us, let us continue the change in conversation for a better Virgin Islands. Good evening.